Hello, this is Stephen R, and yes, we're back with another Green Hornet 66 episode review. Today, we'll be reviewing the episode The Hornet and the Firefly. So without any further ado, let's hop straight into this review. We begin the episode at night, where we go to a local warehouse where a device is set up via phone. We will also find out the Green Hornet and Kato are also patrolling at night, probably for a new case that we do not yet know. The phone is set up to be answered, and once it did, a fire explosion causing the building to be burnt down. And then we head into the opening credits where we see and then afterwards we see the aftermath of the event. Now the Green Hornet and Kato realize they were too late to stop the fire, too late for the fire, and they get a call from Frank Scanlon talking about how, this is another fire, there's people who are injured and the security guards are fine, but this is yet a problem as several warehouses are being burned and is really causing a problem for the city. Frank Scanlon then, of course, informs the Green Hornet to go to the Commissioner's office tomorrow, and there's going to be a meeting, but come as Britt Reed. We come there in the morning where the Commissioner is there with a whole bunch of other people, still trying to decipher and, put together, what to do, as right now these are just getting out of control and their efforts are proving useless. Mike Axford comes forward with a suggestion and brings in Lieutenant Dan, who happens to be a former police officer before being discharged, before eventually leaving the force due to his injury where he has to wear an eye patch. Lieutenant Dan offers his services, but because of his injury, the commissioner kind of refuses to really bring him on board, and Lieutenant Dan accepts it and walks away. Even though Frank, Mike Axford tries to convince him to stay, Lieutenant Dan says it's fine and walks away, and again continues to walk away. As a result of that and more discussion, we go back to the Daily Sentinel, where Britt Reed is just looking on more news reports of how the local fires have been burning in warehouses and plants all over. This has become like a real, huge for the city. Eventually, Mike Axford comes and convinces Britt Reed to hire Lieutenant Dan and to essentially help him with locating the fires. Even though Britt Reed is skeptical about the idea, he agrees, but nonetheless, probably because he not doesn't trust Mike Axford, but I guess he knows Lieutenant Dan does have experience, and Mike says that he and Lieutenant Dan go way back. We've known each other for a lot of years, and he's a fast learner, trust me, he can help. Just give him some room to. And so Britt Reed decides to bring him on board to help him out with this fire problem. Later that night, Britt Reed and Kato, dressed in their guise as the Green Hornet and Kato respectively, go out to another local warehouse. Because of advice from, what Mike Axford has suggested, they agree to follow that advice. Eventually they go to a local warehouse where the man who's been doing the fires is there, dressed in weird looking garb, but it's meant to be a fire retardant suit, and he's basically there at this warehouse to cause a fire. He knocks out a guard and starts setting up the fire. The Green Hornet and Kato end up going to the place, and Britt Reed goes, Green Hornet goes in, and as this firebug, as he's essentially being kind of nicknamed, comes out, and ends up knocking out Kato before running away. The Green Hornet manages to get out, and they realize that they have yet failed, to prevent a fire, and they end up driving away. We then see a car park at a nearby house, and the person revealed is to be Lieutenant Dan, where he comes face to face with Mike Axford. Mike Axford manages to put the pieces together, and finds out that the so-called firebug is actually Lieutenant Dan causing the fires. Now, Lieutenant Dan tries to defend himself. Saying that he's just there to, prevent the fires. He has nothing to do with it, but Mike actually managed to put the pieces together, and he can't deny it. But he asks the question as to why. But it turns out, on an old case, Lieutenant ended up getting injured, resulting in his eye patch we see him wear. As a result of that, he kind of got promoted from the field work and ended up on desk, which he didn't like. He then did these fires as a way to get payback, and also to reclaim some glory, as he has a photo album of all his past cases. And like Mike Axford says, it's the headlines you miss. Well, you're about to make the biggest one yet. And just as he's about to go and answer the phone, he's held at gunpoint, and essentially, is forced to put down the phone, And even though Mike tries to talk some sense into him, he, Lieutenant Dan is delusional, too far gone, and refuses to essentially listen to what he has to say. The next morning, they go through the paper and again put the possible blame on the Green Hornet, as he just happened to be at the scene of the fire. Britt Reed finds it ironic that even though the Green Hornet's in the paper, Mike Axford isn't around. He wonders where he is, and then he naturally goes to see the lieutenant to see possibly if he knows where Mike is. Whilst he goes there, he, is fully, goes there. Lieutenant hasn't seen him, even though there's some evidence proving that Mike was there. And Britt Reed puts the pieces together that the lieutenant is possibly the Firebug. He still brings him on as a possible reporter to help. The lieutenant comes up with a possible way to catch the bug. He clearly wants the Firebug. The lieutenant said he wants to do it himself, saying that bring a whole bunch of cops there would, just make the matter worse. So Britt Reed decides to let him go and do it. Britt Reed then goes and explains this to Frank Scanlon. I also want to point out I've actually been saying the guy's name wrong all episode. It's actually Lieutenant Wade, not Lieutenant Dan, probably because I'm watching too much Forrest Gump. But anyway, it's Lieutenant Wade. He reveals, to Frank Scanlon about the whole thing, how Wade's possibly holding Axford a prisoner, and clearly wants to give the guy enough rope to lure him into a trap. And it also should be noted that Lieutenant Wade happens to be, at least has experience capturing, arson criminals. So I find that a little bit interesting and clearly ties into the guy's MO. Lieutenant Wade quickly gets his gear ready to go and attack another fire, with obviously the Green Hornet and Kato also planning to go there because Lieutenant Wade gave up information. He brings Mike Axford along to have him take the rap of him being the person responsible for the fires. Just as Lieutenant Wade is setting up the thing for the warehouse to go up in flames, Mike Axford says, some good suspect I'll be with me being tied up. As a result, Lieutenant Wade begins to slowly untie him. Just as this point happens, the Green Hornet and Kato make their appearance in the warehouse. Mike Axford manages to disarm the lieutenant, but round about that time, he quickly gets knocked out. The Firebug ends up throwing a whole bunch of, essentially, fire grenades at the Green Hornet and Kato, eventually with him ending up in a standoff with the two, and then eventually Kato. This then results in Kato knocking out the lieutenant literally into a whole bunch of fire, into a huge fire. The Kato and the Green Hornet manage to quickly get Axford out of there just as the building goes up in flames. We then end the episode revealing the whole thing. The lieutenant was the Firebug, but Mike Axford asked if he could just play down the story to Britt, saying that he deserves a better epitaph. Even though they say Mike is a hero, he says he doesn't know how the hell he got out of there. But most importantly, he wants Lieutenant to be remembered as a hero and not the scumbag that he, crazy man that he turned out to be. It really shows Mike's character that, even though his friend turned out to be, a criminal, he still, wants at least to remember the good times about him and not the scumbag he turned out to be. I really like that about his character. We end the episode there just as Casey says, "Poor Mike." Okay, another great example of having, Mike Axford having more to do in the story. I always like it every time he pops up, but I'm also beginning to notice that Casey is becoming less important in the series in many ways as Kato does. Kato's really there just for the fight scenes. The Green Hornet, again, are perfect as always, and, and Frank Scanlon is there to create some nice exposition, and generally to help move the plot along in many ways. But let's talk about the villain. The villain this time around is the Firebug, aka Lieutenant Wade, a former police detective in the arson department before an incident caused him, to be put on desk duty and eventually left, with him having that eye patch as a result of his injury. As a result, in order to get payback, but also to regain the glory, as it's also clear that he's a bit of a news hound and just likes the publicity of his name being in the papers, he does this in order to regain it. And it also just shows how far he's gone when he's willing to willing to set up his old friend who still believed in him, was trying to give him a second chance, to set up the fire. I like how this villain is different. So far in the series, in the series, the Green Hornet mostly goes up against a bunch of racketeer types. Nothing to the point of an actual, I would say, supervillain, but unlike most supervillains, this one fits in the world of the Green Hornet because it's something more realistic, and also gives us a very sympathetic villain. The Firebug was played by Roland S. O'Leland. I can't pronounce that last name. But Ben Wade is just something of an interesting character. Even though he's clearly it was meant to die, I would have easily imagined if Season 2 rolled around, this character could have easily been brought back. Wanted to get revenge on perhaps the Green Hornet and Kato for maybe him getting disfigured in the fire. But also at the same time, maybe get revenge on also Mike Axford, who maybe in his delusional mind, you know, caused this whole incident to turn out the way it did. I can easily imagine this guy being brought back. I also find him to very much fit the world because it's more realistic and not over-the-top supervillain. This guy managed to balance being realistic but also colorful, and I think that fits this episode really well. The Hornet and the Firefly. Now, technically, he's actually called the Firebug, not the Firefly, at least from every time watching the episode. But basically, this is a really fun episode and very memorable. I like how the idea of how there's this arson that's going around causing a flame, but also a very interesting villain. Mike Axford, again, every time Mike Axford plays a bit of a role in the story is always fun to me. It really just shows, you know, how fun of a character he is. I really like this episode, and it's definitely one of the more memorable ones in the series, and I think one of its better ones. Give this one a watch if you haven't seen it yet. And there we have it. That was the Hornet and the Firefly. Join us next time. We'll review another episode in the Green Hornet 66 episode review. But until next time, this has been the Steven Hour. And ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.